Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com, and welcome to our first ever Black Friday live stream. Now we're going to be streaming for the next 2 hours, giving you chances to win prizes every 30 minutes. So let's get this thing started. Now our first giveaway, we're giving away 5 of our Partzilla hoodies. Now, I'm not a huge hoodie fan, but I have one of these. And it is high quality material, soft, has pockets, and of course our Partzilla chimp right in the middle, as well as of course the hood and then the drawstrings. All right, next, this is not a giveaway, but it's really close to it. Now everybody's been asking for a long time for us to start selling some of our apparel, and we've started with a Partzilla t-shirt as well as a tank top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to offer free shipping on any orders over $25 today only, and we're going to give you 65% off on these shirts and tank tops. So what is that going to cost you? A whopping $9. This is by far and away our most popular shirt and tank top. So come on in, order yours today at Partzilla.com to get that 65% off, as well as free shipping when you use code LIVE24, and that's LIVE 24, no spaces for that bonus code. Now we're going to be giving away new prizes every 30 minutes, so make sure you keep coming back for more chances to win. In each giveaway, we're going to have at least 5 prizes, so share this feed with your friends. Now, over the next 2 hours, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite how-to videos in between the giveaways. Now, I want you to go in and comment on the feed during the how-to videos for chances to win bonus prizes like stickers, hats, and gift cards. Now, we'll be picking commentators at random, so if you want to comment to win, make sure you follow us on our social channels so we can DM you to get the info we need so we can get the prizes out to you. Got it? Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today I want to talk to you a couple of minutes about fork oils, and specifically how your choice of fork oil will affect your motorcycle handling and performance. Now, what do you need to look for? Well, first you need to have a basic understanding of what happens inside your fork and how the different oils will impact what's going on inside. So if you're ready, we'll go take a look. So let's go. Okay, so what's going on inside the fork? Well, basically, there's a spring that compresses as you go over bumps and then rebounds once you get to the other side. Now, there's also a dampening system that controls the rate of compression and the rate of rebound. And that's where the fork oil actually comes into play. The dampening system will have a dampening rod, some number of valves, which are basically just holes, and the fork oil, which flows through those valves when the spring is compressed, that pushes against the dampening rod, and the rods force the fork oil through those valves or holes. So the rate of the oil flowing through those holes controls the rate of compression and hence the rate of rebound. Now you control that rate by the viscosity or thickness of the fork oil. So what happens when that oil is just a little too thin? Well, your compression and rebound rates, they'll be quicker. You might feel the fork bottom out and the motorcycle feels like it's, well, the front end's basically bouncing around, and that means it's going to be unpredictable. Now, on the other hand, if the oil is too thick, it can't pass through those little holes as efficiently. And that's going to mean compression and rebound are going to be slow. And that can make for a really harsh, bumpy ride since the oil is holding up the spring from allowing travel inside the fork. Now, the other thing that fork oil does is provide lubrication for the fork tubes themselves. Now, this helps to slow down wear and corrosion, and also helps with heat, since the constant movement of the tubes, it generates a lot of friction. So, the thickness of the fork oil is measured in viscosity, and that is a measurement of how resistant a fluid is to flow. You got me so far? A higher viscosity, the slower it flows, like syrup versus water. So the higher the viscosity, the more dampening you get, since it takes more force to get the fork oil through those holes in the valves in the fork. Now with a lower viscosity, well, you get the exact opposite. Simple, right? Well, the trick is finding out what's what, because viscosity and weight, they don't always line up. And you can end up with lots of different viscosities that are all the same weight, and even end up with higher viscosities at a lower weight. So a 5 or a 7 weight fork oil might end up being thicker than a 10 or 15 weight fork oil, and that just makes it even more confusing. So what you need to look for is the viscosity index, or VI for short. What that does, it gives you a measure of how consistent the viscosity of your oil is across a temperature range. And the higher the number, the more consistent the oil is. Now it also means that you'll have less fall off in dampening capabilities as the oil heats up, since it's going to be more consistent. And a lower number of fork oil will thin out and offer less dampening properties. So how do you pick an oil? Well, you get on the internet. The VI indexes are all over the place. I mean, how do you get the right fork oil to go in your fork? Well, think about how much weight you're going to be putting on the suspension. You, maybe a passenger, maybe some luggage, and realize the more weight you carry, generally the thicker the oil needs to be. Then you need to think about the surface that you're riding on. Are you just on public roads? Do you get off on the trail sometimes on a dual sport? Maybe you're racing on really smooth asphalt, so you don't need anything nearly as thick there. And finally, some of it goes down to personal preference. How do you want the motorcycle to ride? A big cruiser needs something thicker to handle the additional weight, and a dirt bike, where you're going to be in nothing but bumps, might do better with something thinner and more reactive. So here's the thing. Your manufacturer is going to offer some recommendation as to what kind of fork oil you should take, and it's a good idea not to stray far away from that. Maybe you want to move a little bit one way or the other, but you don't want to go crazy. If the manufacturer says to use a 5 weight oil, maybe go to a 5 weight oil with a higher or lower VI index. Or maybe get an oil just a little bit heavier, but don't say go from a 5 to a 15 weight. That's going to drastically change what happens in your fork and how your motorcycle rides. So just remember, moving around that viscosity index is going to allow you to fine-tune your ride as opposed to jumping into a way heavier oil and just hoping for the best. Well, that'll about do it, guys. Just remember, think small changes to fine-tune your ride as opposed to big swings into the unknown. And if you want to see us change the fork oil in a motorcycle, well, we've got a couple of videos taking you through that process. Well, listen, if you need any parts for your machine, come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today I'm going to walk you through the process to change out the seals on a brake caliper. It's pretty much the same procedure regardless of what type of brake caliper it is or what machine it came off of. Now what you are going to see that's different from caliper to caliper is that it may have either 1, 2, or even 3 pistons that you're having to deal with. And of course, more pistons makes them a little bit more challenging to deal with. The one that we're working on today only has 2, so it shouldn't be that big of a problem to get it done. Let me go put on some gloves and we'll dive into this real quick. Now the name of the game here is to keep things as clean as you possibly can. So what I'm going to do is use a little bit of our contact cleaner to get all this residual dirt and gunk that I can see that's on the caliper, because the last thing I want to happen is for that to work its way in after I pull those pistons out. So let me head this over to the washdown table, get that cleaned up, and then I'll show you how to get those pistons popped out of there. So we've got it cleaned up reasonably well, and what we're going to do now is either place a rag or a piece of cardboard in front of the pistons, and then we're going to apply air pressure to the inlet. Now keep in mind, this is not going to take a lot of pressure, and when they come out of there, they're going to come out of there with a lot of authority, and you do not want to have your fingers in here when you do it. Otherwise, it's going to leave a mark, and I don't think you want that to happen. We've got a cardboard in place, and we're going to apply a little bit of pressure right here. Remember, this is not going to take a lot, so just barely pull the trigger. All right, we got one. Let's put that back in there and see if we can get the other one to release. This is the trick when you're working with multi-piston calipers. One side usually plops out and the other side's still hung up in there. Now what the cardboard accomplishes, other than keeping it from flying across the room, it holds it in just far enough to where we can hopefully get the other one to release and push out to that same level. There it goes. A little bit of air pressure makes all the difference. Now we can work them the rest of the way out. And as I said, the name of the game is to keep things clean as possible. All right, I can see now why this other one was a little bit hesitant on coming out. There's actually a fair amount of gunk, dirt, whatever that's been built up inside. Because what you're going to find is there are actually 2 seals. You've got an outer dust seal and then an inner compression seal. It's just a little bit further in right here. Now more than likely the dust seal failed on that one that didn't want to quite work its way out because it had some foreign material that crammed in there. And this is a really close tolerance, and it doesn't take much to jam it up. So these should work a whole lot better when we go to put it back on the machine. So let's get our old seals out. Like so. We're going to use some brake cleaner to clean up the pistons while they're out. Fair amount of trash on there. Now we're going to take some brake fluid, put it on a rag, and then clean out the inside of the caliper itself. These are actually in pretty good shape, so it's not going to take me long to do this. Just do take the time to clean up the caliper before you pull it apart, because this is where you would cram a bunch of dirt in there if you did not clean it up properly. Now with that done, it's just a matter of getting the seals back in. Be careful when you're doing this. Take your time. Do not rip or puncture either that inner sealing seal or O-ring or the dust seal out here. Because if you do, then your caliper is going to leak again and or get dirt into it. There we go. Now we'll take a little bit of brake fluid, put it around the seal, then on the piston itself, and just pop it back in. And she's in. All right guys, one down, the other side to go. It is installed exactly the same way. After that, all I have to do is remount it to the machine, fill it up with some brake fluid, get it bled, and then she's ready for the track. Well, listen, no matter what machine you have, if you need tools or parts or chemicals, come see us at Partzilla and we can get you taken care of. If you have any questions or comments about this particular video, leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, guys and girls, you've heard of a 2-minute warning. Well, this is a 5-minute warning. This is the last 5 minutes for our current giveaway. Enter to win now at partzilla.com/Black Friday. So get over there and enter to win. There's only a few minutes left.
A perfect session to me would be throwing that thing through the air. My name is Scott Champion. I race professional motocross, supercross, and UTV racing, and I'm working on living up to that last name. Growing up, I definitely knew that I wanted to race motocross and supercross professionally. My dad, he raced professionally, my uncle raced, and I would just ride with them pretty much from 4 years old. We would ride from the garage and spend all day on our bikes. I turned pro in 2008. I qualified 4th overall and kind of put myself on the map. The best thing about being pro is you get to ride your motorcycle every day, right? The hardest part about being pro, definitely the injuries. You know, it's not if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt. In 2021, I had a shoulder injury. My dad was like, hey, come check out this UTV race and I think you'll really like it. Literally went in with no expectations and won a couple races that year, and I just wanted more and more and more of it. Coming from 2 wheels, I definitely have some strengths on the track, picking good lines, putting myself in good positions, and then just knowing how to hit the jumps. Putting the #1 plate on my UTV has been awesome. It's a big number to run. Some guys are like, oh, I'm not running it next year, but you know, you gotta let them know sometimes. I'm learning all the parts of the car. There's so many things going on and so many new things to me. I'm looking forward to perfecting those. I can relate a lot of things in racing to, you know, life lessons. You know, if you have a bad race or if you end up breaking the bike, you figure out a way to fix it, and same with anything in life. The no quit, the no give up attitude is something that I learned in racing and something that I use almost every day. I am not scared of taking risks if it means winning.
Hello everyone. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla Black Friday live stream. We are streaming live until 1 p.m. Eastern time today, and we will be giving away new prizes every 30 minutes. Now, for the next 30 minutes, we are going to be giving away 10 entrants a Partzilla high profile camo hat. Now, all you need to do is head over to partzilla.com/Black Friday. Now, this high profile camo hat, that's probably it's the most requested hat we have. Now, a lot of people like that wide look, the fat bill and the wide front. But if you're old like me, you may want something more traditional like this. And if that's the case, if you're one of the winners, just let us know and we'll give you the hat that you want. New hotness, old guy hat is entirely up to you. Hey, I'll wear this with quite a bit of pride. Let's face it, I wouldn't look right in the camo hat, now would I? Now, I just want to reiterate that we're giving away 10 hats of your choice. So head on over to partzilla.com/Black Friday to enter to win. It doesn't cost you anything to do so, but you're running out of time because remember, we're switching it up every 30 minutes. So head over there now and enter to win whatever hat you choose. Now, also keep in mind that we are offering our Partzilla t-shirts and tank tops at only $9 a shirt, and that is 65% off what we normally sell them for. And if you use the code LIVE24, that gets you free shipping. So head on over to partzilla.com and get yours on the way. Now, over the next 2 hours, I'm also going to be sharing some of my favorite how-to videos in between the giveaways. Comment on the feed during one of the how-to videos for chances to win bonus prizes like stickers, hats, and gift cards. We will be picking commenters at random, so if you want to comment to win, just make sure you follow us on our social channels so we can DM you to get back the information we need to get the prizes mailed out to you. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about wiring and connections and the best way to keep your machine performing optimally. And if you run into a problem where a wire has been cut or bad connection or corrosion, the best way to address that and correct it long term. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things you should not do when it comes to repairing your harness. And then I'm going to give you a couple of options as to a way you can repair it if replacing the entire harness is just really not an option for you. But before we dive into that, let's talk about your battery connections, because that is typically one of the main areas that corrosion is going to take hold and then make it to where your machine won't run properly, or worse than that, won't even start. When you're getting your machine ready to go for the season, and I'm sure you had a battery tender on it, so your battery's good to go, you still want to go ahead and pull the positive and the negative leads off of the battery. Make sure that the terminals are actually clean, usually with a wire brush. Clean the post on the battery, reconnect them, and then it's a good idea to spray them down with a high quality cleaner and protector. Yamalube makes a great product just for that. Next, let's talk about fuses. Most importantly, usually when they pop, something went wrong to cause them to blow. So just cramming in another one, especially one of a higher value, is not going to work out for you long term. These are sized for whatever circuit is on the machine. And if you just put in a larger one to keep it from popping, you're stressing the harness that it was designed to protect, and you're probably going to end up frying it. And talking about having to replace or repair something, you don't want to try to repair a wire that is basically heated up and then burned into all the other wires going throughout your harness. You're going to end up replacing the harness. There's just no other way around that. Now, if it pops a fuse and you have the correct amperage in there, that is your machine saying, help, I've got a problem. Figure out why this happened. It could be a short. It could be an overloaded circuit. Whatever it is, you need to run it down, because if you just cram in a larger fuse, you're opening up yourself to damage your wiring harness, and worse than that, potentially catch your machine on fire. So just don't do it. So what you need to do is take your time and figure out why that fuse actually blew. One other common mistake that I see is when people add on a light bar or a sound system, they're not paying very close attention to where they're routing their wires. My rule of thumb is, if you can, at all possible, if you're going from one end of the machine to the other, follow the existing wiring harness. Whatever pathway the manufacturer took is probably going to be safe from heat and or pivot points on the machine. It may look easier just to run it in a certain direction, but look what's around it. I mean, if you've got exhaust or suspension pivot points, etc., any type of movement and or heat is going to affect that wire. Maybe not immediately, but it's going to get to it eventually. So rule of thumb is, follow the existing wiring harness wherever you can. That's going to be the safest route. Last but not least, you don't want to tag on to the existing wiring harness. It was designed to carry the load for the machine, and that's it. If you are going to add a load, you need to separate that from the main harness. The best way to do that is to use a relay. The relay is pretty much nothing but an electronic switch. You can use part of your harness to activate it and deactivate it, such as adding in on the light switch, but by doing that, you're only loading down what it takes to close that relay, which the wiring harness can deal with. Now, if you connect your new light directly into the existing wiring harness for the lighting system, you're increasing the load to a level it was never designed to deal with. By putting in that relay, you're transferring the load from the main harness over to the battery where it needs to be to begin with. Now let's go through the scenario where you have a cut wire somewhere on your harness, and you've actually gone through the process with your volt-ohm meter to track it down, and you're going, do I really want to have to replace an entire harness just for this one connection? Well, if you do it correctly, it won't be a problem. Let me show you a couple of things that you do not do. One, my favorite, you twist them back together and maybe just lay it over. That's the worst I can think of. Let's go one step further. You twist it together, out comes the electrical tape or whatever tape you may have laying around, and then you do something like this. Well, guess what? Any stress, bang, there it goes. Next, another personal favorite of mine. Wires are twisted together. Look over in your toolbox, and all you can find is one of these. No, don't do this, especially on an ATV or a side-by-side, because all you've done is create a cup for it to fill up with water or mud or whatever, and then start corroding almost immediately. One step further, using a butt connector. Now, there's nothing really wrong with using a butt connector. But there's a problem here. Now, you're heading in the right direction. But with this particular style of butt connector, once you've made your connection, guess what? It is still opened up to the outside air. So that is another place where you potentially have corrosion from water intrusion and or humidity. Now let's talk about the correct way to do this. This is a butt connector, but there's a difference here. This is actually a butt connector that has a shrinkable tube around it. So once you make your connections and get it crimped down, you would use a heat gun to shrink down the tube, and that effectively seals the connection inside. Now it is important that you use the right size butt connector to do this, and don't crimp it so hard that you actually damage the shrink tube that goes around it. Now this is a secure connection. It is protected from the outside environment. It can get wet and it's not going to bother it. But we can do one step further if we want to truly have a professional connection. This is my preferred method. What we're going to do is use a section of heat shrink tubing. The real trick here is to go ahead and put the tubing on before you start your connection. I can't count how many times I've actually forgotten to do that in my checkered past. Strip these back. The technique I use, we want to meet them about halfway and twist them over like this. Now, use a little bit of solder. Make sure that you get the connection hot enough to where the solder flows into the wire and not just globbed up on the outside. Let it cool down a little bit before you bring up the heat shrink, otherwise it'll get caught. You won't be able to cover up the whole thing. All right, I think we're good. Now bring over your heat shrink, put the connection roughly in the middle. Now the other thing I want to recommend, the heat shrink that you use, make sure it has a gel fill on the inside. Because when it shrinks down, it's actually going to heat up that gel, and then it's going to completely encapsulate your connection on the inside. I don't know about you, but that's the way I want to see my harness repaired. Because that is not going to pull apart. You're going to break the wire trying to pull that apart. But I know that this connection is going to last for a long time. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this little video. Well, listen, if you need any parts or tools for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and true a wheel that we relaced in another video. And if you need help lacing up yours, why don't you reference that one, watch it through, get yours put together, and then meet me back here so we can get it trued. Well, we're going to be using a truing stand from R&L. There's a couple of different manufacturers out there. It just really depends, well, how often are you going to do this as to how nice of one you really need to get. But the basic principle is going to be the same. You want the wheel to be able to maintain a constant location and then have a pointing device of some type that's going to let you know if the rim is moving one way or another or out of round. So all we need to do is get this hub mounted up and then we can start the process. Now this particular stand has a couple of different options where you can either put an axle up here, spin it in that location, or these two which actually come in and hold it by the bearings, and that's the one we're going to use. So let's bring her over. You don't have to do this super tight, you just want it firm to where it isn't moving around so you get a good read on it. There, that should do. Now what we're looking for here is just to get a general feel of how out of whack it is. We're looking at the side-to-side movement and then the up and down as well, or the hop, so to speak. Now on a dirt bike, it isn't super critical that you get it perfect, and let's face it, this rim, it's designed to go off-road, so it's not quite as precise, or the tolerances aren't as precise as, let's say, on a rim that goes on a high-performance street bike. We do want to get it as close as we can to true, but more importantly, we want to make sure that we have the correct torque on all these spokes so it doesn't loosen up and then damage itself. So let's take a quick look and just get an overall idea of what's going on with it. All right, our hop is not terrible, so we should be able to straighten that out fairly quickly. Our side to side, it doesn't look that bad either, so I think we're going to be able to get this one in line fairly easily. When we laced this one, we just basically got everything close to bottoming out just to hold it in place, but as you can see, a lot of play there. So our starting point is to get all of these bottomed out, and we want to just barely seat them. Once we do that, then we'll go back and take a look at it and start figuring out how to adjust it to get it to walk in the right direction. First, let's get a reference point, because we're going to be coming back to this over and over again. There's actually two holes in the rim, one for the bead lock and one's for the valve stem. From the looks of this one, they're both the same, so we're just going to pick one and make a mark on it. We're just going to go spoke to spoke, and all we're trying to accomplish is just get them seated. When we're done with this process, we'll know that we have all of them seated. When we go to spin it over, you shouldn't hear any of that clicking of the spokes pushing against the rim, because they're all going to be at least up to it. And if one feels a little too tight, back it off and reseat it again. We're going to come off this last one with the mark right here. We don't hear any more clicking. So let's see where our hop is first. We're going to put our pointer about 1/4 of an inch away, take a peek at it. Not too severe, maybe a little over 1/8 of an inch. Let's find our low point. Okay. That's the midpoint. What we're going to do is pick 4 this direction and 4 that direction and just do 1/8 of a turn to see if we can bring her up. Now, as you're doing this, if they start getting too tight, you may need to go on the other side and loosen up just a bit. All right. It lifted it up a tick. Let's do it one more time. All right. What we're looking at there is mainly just that juncture where it's welded together. That transition isn't completely level, but overall she's shifting maybe a 1/16 now, so I think we're good to go. Next, let's look at the side to side. That's our close point right there. Here. Then she starts to pull away. What we're going to do, since that's the shorter section and the rest of this looks uniform, we're going to pull this direction on it. So we're only going to be working from this side. Once again, small increments. We're going to back up a couple of spokes and just do 1/4 turns. Where's that last mark? All right, so we just went from here to here, just on that side. All right, we made some progress, but let's do that one more time. Same spokes. You're doing this pretty much by feel. One of them feels loose, then it needs to be caught up with the other ones. Like I said, the trick is do this in small increments. Otherwise, you start getting things out of whack, putting too much tension on one or more spokes, and you pretty much have to start over again. Oh yeah, still a little bit of wobble to take out, but we're getting closer. We're going to go through the same procedure, see if we can pull it in a little bit closer, and then take another look at it. So we just want to pull this section over a little bit more. 1/4 inch turn on each one. Let's see where we ended up. That's pretty good, guys. It's got a little bit of hop to it because of that joint, but as far as our side to side, we're on it. Now it is time to actually torque all these down, and we're going to use a very small torque wrench to accomplish this, specifically made for spokes. And this particular kit has got a full range of all the different sizes that are commonly found on most rims. And the way we're going to do this is actually in 3 passes. We're going to find our start point, which we had marked here, and what we're going to do is tighten this one, skip 2, and then go to the 3rd. The next pass, we'll move to the next one, skip 2, and then tighten it. Last pass, move to the next one, skip 2, and then we'll complete the process. What that is doing is alternating back and forth as we're going all the way around. For this particular rim, they want them torqued somewhere in between 2.5 and 3 foot-pounds, and that's around 30 inch-pounds. So we're going to set that. And off we go. Just want to pay careful attention here and don't lose where you are, so try to remain focused. There's our first one. Skip 2. Just take your time, do this right. We did it right because we started there and we're ending with this one. That's it. Yep. Check it one more time. Make sure we ended back up where we started. Still got that little hop at the seam, but this one's good to go. Well, all right, guys. There you have it. A little bit of a time-consuming project, but if you're around these machines long enough, it's worth learning how to do. That way you can just handle it at your house instead of taking it to the dealership. Well, listen, if you need these parts or tools or anything else for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, guys and girls, you've heard of a 2-minute warning. Well, this is a 5-minute warning. This is the last 5 minutes for our current giveaway. Enter to win now at partzilla.com/Black Friday. So get over there and enter to win. There's only a few minutes left. Hello everyone. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla Black Friday live stream. Now we're streaming live until 1 p.m. Eastern time today, and we're giving away new prizes every 30 minutes. Now this next one up, we're giving away 5 of these, and this is one of my favorites. When they first showed me these as a prototype, I said, I gotta have these. So actually, I think I picked up the first 2 pairs that we produced. Now these are actually made by Vizio, super high quality. I mean, check that out. Very impressive. MSRP on these things is $120 of each, and we're actually giving away 5 of them. So all you have to do is head over to Partzilla.com/Black Friday to enter to win. Entering doesn't cost you anything. So definitely worth your time for all these different prizes, but this one just happens to be my favorite. Now, as a reminder, I just want to let you know that we are putting our best-selling t-shirts and tank tops on sale for only $9 of each. And if you use the promo code LIVE24, we'll ship it out for free. So it can't get any better than that. And that $9 price, that is 65% off the MSRP for these shirts. So head on over and get yours on order. Now, over the next 2 hours, I'm also going to be sharing some of my favorite how-to videos in between the giveaways. Comment on the feed during one of the how-to videos for chances to win bonus prizes like stickers, hats, and gift cards. We'll be picking commenters at random, so if you want to comment to win, make sure you follow us on our social channels so we can DM you to get the information we need to get the prizes shipped out to you. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. You know, 10W30 and 10W40 oils, well, they're everywhere. They're probably the most common motor oils in the world, and they're really similar when you come down to it. But how are they different, and can you use both the 10W30 and 10W40 oil in your particular machine? Well, if you're ready to learn how these oils are different, we can look into that, so let's go. Now, let's start with what those numbers actually mean. Both 10W30 and 10W40 are multi-grade oils. This means that they can carry properties of different weight oils depending on the conditions. The first grade is the number before the W, and the second grade is the number after the W. Both of these oils are 10W, meaning that in low temperatures, the W stands for winter. They will behave as regular old 10W SAE grade oil. This means that the oil is thinner and will flow quickly, even when cold, to lubricate an engine when it started on a cold day. Now, the second number, that one after the W is where the slight difference is found in these oils. The second number represents the oil's viscosity at temperatures above 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. The higher the number, the thicker the oil is at higher operating temperatures. So the 10W40 oil will be a tad thicker than the 10W30 oil when the engine is hot, meaning it will offer a little bit more protection. Think of it this way. Both of these oils are good for cold starts, but if you're in a warmer climate or your engine runs a little bit hotter, the 10W40 oil is going to be the way to go. But if you live somewhere colder or your engine runs cooler, the 10W30 will work better since it runs a little thinner in cooler temperatures. Now, what about fuel economy? The flow of oil adds drag inside your engine. A thinner oil will produce less drag and allow you to increase fuel economy. So a 10W30 oil will offer better fuel economy than the 10W40 oil. But choosing an oil based on whether it will drive better fuel economy is a mistake. Choose the right oil for the engine and the operating conditions. So, can you use either oil in your motorcycle? Sure, but it's best to use the oil recommended by the manufacturer for your conditions. There is one additional consideration though, and that's how the oil relates to your clutch. In a car, there's a separate transmission fluid, but in a motorcycle, that same oil lubricates the engine, the clutch, and the gearbox in most cases. Also, be careful about additives in automotive oils. Some friction modifiers will impact the engagement of your motorcycle's clutch. So, using an automotive oil in a motorcycle is a tricky proposition, and I wouldn't recommend it unless you have no other alternative. Either grade will work, but choose a motorcycle variant so that your clutch is protected. Then in the end, either 10W30 or 10W40 would probably be fine in moderate climate conditions. But the higher the heat, the more you might want to lean into that 10W40 oil. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today we're going to be doing some work on a 2018 Honda Grom. Today we're going to be focused on the clutch system, but while we're in there, we're going to go ahead and install a high-flow oil pump. But there are also a couple of other parts that we're going to need. Now once again, we went to COSO North for the majority of our parts. We've got the clutch kit, and we're also installing a lifter. Here's our oil pump. Now in addition to that, there's a couple other pieces that you're going to need that are OEM. You're going to need a gasket for that cover, and then the bearing that actually goes inside of this lift plate. The neat thing about this one, when we're through building it, we're actually going to give it away. So if you would check the link in the description below, it'll carry you to a landing page where you can enter to win. But if the contest is already over, why don't you leave us a little note in the comment section and tell us what machine you'd like to see me modify and then us give away. Now, as far as the special tools, here they are. First one I want to talk about is this adapter that's going to pull two different nuts. One that holds the main nut for the clutch, and the other one's for what they call the old spinner. This one part will actually do both of those. The other thing that you're going to need is something to hold the gears still. Now, Honda makes one for this process. Just have that in the gears when they come together. That's going to hold everything still and not damage the gears. Now that we've got our parts and our special tools assembled, we can go over there and get started. We're going to start this process by laying in our fiber plates, and we're just going to pour a quart of oil so they can soak while we're pulling the rest of the machine apart. Now I'm just using standard GN4 oil, nothing special. We just don't want to put the plates in dry, because if we do that, there's a chance that they'll never pick up the oil and immediately start tearing themselves apart. Let's put that to the side. Next, we're going to go ahead and drop the oil out of the machine. You just need a 17 millimeter to do that. And the bolt you're looking for is right here. Now we probably could have used the oil out of it to soak our plates, because this machine has, I think, 2 miles on it. Yep, it looks brand new. So we've got our plates soaking, all the oil's drained out. Let's go ahead and reinstall our drain plug. Now let's go ahead and get our brake lever out of the way, and instead of removing the entire bracket, we're just going to remove the pivot point right here, and that should allow it to drop down far enough to clear the case. Now let's go for this bracket up top that holds the clutch cable. So we should just be able to remove the bracket while it's still mounted to the cable, and then release it from the clutch arm. There she goes. Now what Honda wants you to do is actually just remove the other bolts in a crisscross pattern. They're all loose. Now we're just going to buzz them out. Now when we pull this cover, it's going to drool some oil onto the exhaust system, and I'm not really worried about that at the moment because we are going to be replacing it. But if you were not, it'd be a good idea to cover it up so you don't have so much of a mess to clean up later. And all these bolts, they all look to be the same length. But before you pull the cover, make sure you remove the dipstick, otherwise it's going to get caught on that centrifugal filter. Next, let's get off this cover. To make this a little bit easier, they actually make a special tool to go in the gearing here to hold all of this still. And that's not absolutely necessary, it just sits in there like this. You could actually use just a piece of aluminum, let the gears bind down on it. Just make sure you remove it when you put it back together. Now if these weren't Loctited, that wouldn't be a big deal, just breaking it loose. But yeah, I'm having to put a fair amount of effort, and it'd be really tough to hold this still with your hands. So to pull this off, you'll need a Honda special tool to actually get in there and grab that particular bolt. Lay everything out in the same sequence that it comes out. We'll definitely need to clean this up before we put it back together. Tell you what, let's go ahead and get the gasket off. Oh, and for once, Honda used a gasket that you could actually remove. Those greenish type gaskets are so well made, they're extremely difficult to get off. That's usually the most arduous part of this, is getting all the residual, like right here, pulled off. And this one has come off rather smoothly. Now with that plate down, Let's reach in and remove this bearing. Hopefully it'll come out smoothly. So with the bearing out of the way, it is time to go ahead and release that inner bolt. I've seen them come apart with just holding the gear still, but sometimes those springs aren't quite tight enough to hold everything still to get that bolt to release. So this is one of the few times I'll use an impact. I don't really mind using them to take something apart. I never use them to put something together. With that off, we're going to take out this outer plate. And want to do that a couple of turns at a time as to not damage the bolts and or the threads they're going into on the inner part of the clutch. Now the reason we're doing all this is increasing the displacement and the airflow in the head, and doing programming and different throttle body, and it's just going to put too much stress on the factory clutch. By going with the COSO unit, it should be able to deal with the additional torque and the horsepower that this thing's going to develop. Because you can look at the diameter of the stock springs versus the COSO springs. You can visually see the difference, and you can also feel the difference. I can just about compress that one all the way just with my fingers, and I can maybe get the COSO unit halfway. So that's going to put a lot more pressure onto the plates that's going to allow them to hold together better. Now, here's where it's important to mark how things come apart, because we want this part to be in the same orientation with the back. Now, what I think we'll do here is just pull off the whole assembly, because putting it back together, it'll be easier to do that on the table and then just bring it up. There we go. Pull out your washer. Once again, lay things out as you're taking them apart. Makes it a whole lot easier to put back together when you're done. I'm going to go ahead and lift out the clutch pack as an assembly, pretty much one piece. Just lay this to the side. Now here's the part I wanted to show you. When you go to put this back together, we hit it like this. Let's go one off. See that? It will not engage and go all the way down. It has to go as it was taken apart, like that. Because if you don't do that correctly, it's not going to put any pressure on the plates, and you're just going to burn up a brand new clutch. So make sure you match this up. And if you forget to match it, well, just keep going step by step by step up until you can get it to go back in. And that's right there. So important little tip there. Otherwise, you're never going to get this to work right. When you're putting this back together, make sure this washer doesn't get left out. And now we can start stacking our clutch back together. So I know on some of the older Groms, you actually had different fiber discs that had to go in a certain order as you were coming out. On this particular kit from COSO, all the fibers are the same, so it doesn't matter how they are stacked. And the best you can, eyeball it to where the teeth are actually lined up. That'll make it easier when we go to put this section together. And now we're just going to alternate back and forth until the stack is complete. Looks like I've got most of the teeth aligned well enough. Now we can drop this back in. Now with that set in place, let's go ahead and get it and that oil tray back in position. There we go. She's all the way down. Now our washer, and we'll just put this bolt on hand tight. Take note of where your threads are when it comes time to bring the plate up. Get our springs in place. This is where gravity's not really your friend. It may be easier just to put the machine on its side to do this, but we will work it out. We'll get all three of them started and then make sure all of our springs are sitting like they're supposed to. Now as we're bringing these back in, doing 2 or 3 turns at a time, going from one to the other. Alright, looks like everybody's bottomed out now. Now we're going to grab our torque wrench and set these to 9 foot-pounds. That's it. All right, those two 10 millimeters that are holding that little oil tray, getting them back in. Now we're going to switch gears and turn our attention to the oil pump, because now would be the perfect time to go ahead and get it swapped out. Now the reason we're doing this is because we want more oil flow. With this modification, it increases the amount of pressure, hence more oil gets circulated more often inside the engine. Now there are other kits that are available, but the amount of modifications that I'm doing to it, it should make a really safe and reliable machine without having to go any further. Here it is. Both the dowels stayed in the casing. So now all we need to do is take off the circlip, disassemble this, and then actually reassemble it using the same circlip with our new housing and internals. There's our plate. It may not tell you in the manual to do this, but I believe if it's an exposed bolt, especially like this on the inside of an engine, I'm going to put Loctite on it. All right. Now, put your pin through your gear. I'll put the shaft through once you get it aligned properly. There she goes. Then just get our E-clip back in. I think I can do this without piercing myself. There she goes. That should do it. Now let's just bolt it back in place. A little bit more Loctite. Then we'll take each one of these to 9 foot-pounds. Be careful when you're doing this. Make sure that your teeth are aligned on the gears. Otherwise you could snap them as you're pushing it back in. Now, if this is the first time you've been into your engine and you've got some miles on it, now is a good time to clean out this little strainer right here. I expected mine to be perfect because, like I said, this thing had 2 miles on it when we rolled it in the shop. But if yours has a few on it, now's the time to check that and go and get it cleaned out. Now, the other aspect that you need to look at is the centrifugal oil filter, or spinner. I think that's what it's commonly called. It has a little bit of trash in it. Chances are that yours probably has a lot. So now's the time to go ahead and get this cleaned out. Okay, before we get the spinner put back on, let's go ahead and torque that main bolt going to our clutch basket. Both of these nuts actually go to 47 foot-pounds. At this point, we can go ahead and put our bearing back in. Make sure that the lettering is facing out. There we go. Next, let's put the spinner back on. Its washer, and then this nut. Get our holder in place. There we go. We're getting close now, guys. Now this is one gasket I did not reorder, but actually this one looks to be in good shape, so we're going to go ahead and pop it back on. Now I know these had Loctite on them when we took them apart, so they're definitely getting Loctite to go back together. Use our holder one more time. Our dowels are in place. Let's go ahead and get our new gasket up. Stay. All these bolts are the same lengths, so just don't forget these little brackets, and we'll do that one last with the clutch cable on it so we can get the cable back. There we go. Now let's put 9 foot-pounds on all of those. Let's get that last one. There we go. Next, let's bring our brake pedal back up into position. For our current giveaway. Enter to win now at Partzilla.com/Black Friday. So get over there and enter to win. There's only a few minutes left. Hello everybody, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla Black Friday live stream. We are streaming live until 1 p.m. Eastern time today, and we're giving away new prizes every 30 minutes. The next prize, well, it's pretty special, and you really have to know somebody on the inside, me, to get one of these. We do not sell these on Partzilla.com. Now, I'm sure if you've ever been riding at the dunes or been out on a boat, anywhere there's a lot of sun, you've probably seen someone with a hat like this, but not exactly like this one. And now is your time to get it. This hat does a fantastic job of saving your skull when you're out in the sun. Don't believe me? Take a look at these pictures of my last trip down to the BVI. This was my best friend of keeping all those UV rays off of my sensitive dome. The bottom side has a nice camo detail, and the top, it has this really nice dark green look to it. And I know from experience, the sun protection is invaluable, especially when you're planning those long rides or long days out on the boat. Case in point, the last time I used mine out on the water. Now I'll say it again, these are a limited edition and not available anywhere else at this time, and we're only giving away 5 of them. So all you need to do is head over to Partzilla.com/Black Friday right now to enter to win. Now keep in mind the entry will close in 30 minutes, my friends, so don't delay. Go ahead and get over there and get yours on the way. And I also want to remind you that we're having a big sale on our Partzilla shirts and tank tops. Now they're only going for $9 each, and that is 65% off of MSRP. Now if you use the code LIVE24, we'll even ship it to you for free. So head on over to Partzilla.com and get yours on the way. And now for your viewing pleasure, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite how-to videos in between the giveaways. Comment on the feed during one of the how-to videos for chances to win bonus prizes like stickers, hats, and gift cards. We'll be picking commenters at random, and if you want to comment to win, make sure you follow us on our social channels so we can DM you to get the information we need to send the prizes out. Sound like a plan? Go get it. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. And today we're going to be working on yet another project on our 2016 Yamaha YXZ1000R. And as you can tell, we've already done several projects already. One of those being we've upgraded the frame to my 2019. But before we actually put everything together, we put in a frame strengthening kit to make it even stronger. Now also, we went through the engine, dropped the compression from 10.5 down to 9.5 to 1. Also, we've gone through the transmission and done a gear reduction kit. Now, why did we go through all this preparation? Well, it was leading up to this. On this table is an entire GYTR Yamaha turbo kit. Now, there's only one part number, but as you can see, there's a whole bunch of parts under that number. Now, the kit I decided to go with is actually the version 1 from GYTR. The reason I did that is, well, I kind of like the thought of the larger turbo matched with those equal length headers for this particular setup. Now, the installation for version 2 for the newer models, it'll be very similar to what I'll be doing, so you should be able to follow along to get your kit installed. Now also, this kit already comes with a pre-programmed ECU. However, we have changed the compression ratio inside of the engine, so that'll have to be tweaked before we can actually get the maximum output for this particular engine. Well, Yamaha was nice enough to do a printout of every single thing we're going to need to do to accomplish this installation. It's only 12 pages, 51 different items. How tough can it be? Well, now that I've got my instructions on my parts laid out, all I need to do now is open up my toolbox and we can dive into this project. So let's go. All right, guys, step one, we need to get this radiator up front. And believe it or not, try as you might, it will not wiggle its way in. The only way you can get it back into this cavity is to pull one of the shocks and just lay them out of the way temporarily. Now, these are the original shocks. However, I did upgrade the springs to a set from Eibach. Now, if you've got an older unit like I started with, you need to pay extra special attention to your suspension components and make sure they're up to the task. I had to replace most of mine, but most importantly, you want to make sure your bushings are in good shape on all your different pivot points. Also, you'll notice on this one, we have much beefier CV axles all the way around. I mean, with the kind of power that this machine is going to make, it's only as good as the strongest link in your chain, and that is one of the final links before it makes it out to the tires. So just make sure your machine is going to be up to the task when you add a turbo to it, because it's going to stress everything else probably a little bit further than it was initially designed for. So like me, you'll probably save yourself a whole lot of headache by upgrading it now instead of breaking it later and then upgrading it. Now she'll just slide straight in there, ish. All right, guys, there's 3 attachment points. Basically, you've got these 2 bolts that came with the kit. And the third point is right up here, but that gets sandwiched in your voltage regulator rectifier. And when you're remounting the shock, make sure you torque it to 47 foot-pounds. All right, guys, my next step is I have to remount the footwell so I can see where to notch out for the 2 radiator hoses to be routed through on the driver's side. The hoses are going to come through here, so we need to take out this one little section of webbing so there's enough clearance. Now, if you're watching this and you're saying, well, I don't have that particular beam on my frame, well, no, you wouldn't, because this is part of that frame strengthening kit that I mentioned in the intro. But regardless, we need to take out this section right here where the hoses can go through. These hoses are already cut the length, believe it or not. 68.5 and 112, 3/4 inch. And 44 goes to the top of your radiator, well, heat exchanger, and 43 goes down to the bottom. All right, guys, as it shows on the diagram, the longer hose, which is 44, is toward the outside of the rail. 43 is on the inside. Loops up here, goes up over the drive shaft, and actually I think that's the rear brake line. And then we're going to zip tie it up to that center section, as well as right here to hold it in place. I wouldn't zip tie it tight in place until we get it connected back at the back, and that'll give us our final links. All right, guys, we're going to install our water pump using the 53 and 54 nut and bolt, and it's right up under the driver's seat on that lower frame rail. So on Yamaha's diagram, it shows the long hose to the outside. I disagree. It's not the first time I've disagreed with somebody's instructions. So I'm putting the short hose on that side because that way it lines up better going to the water pump. Trick of the trade, a small spray of contact cleaner will help get these hoses on. Just be sure, because once they're on, they're not going to want to come back off. Next, we're going to take the 3/4 inch, 56 inch long hose, route it up next to that longer 110, and attach it to the water pump. Actually, you want it this way. All right, guys, I think we've got it routed correctly. There may be a few adjustments we'll have to do once the plastics start coming into focus. But for right now, let's go ahead and drop it down. Then we can put those last 2 clamps on the radiator / heat exchanger itself. Then go on to the next step. All right, guys, since we're right here, let's go ahead and connect up our wiring, even though our battery's not in place yet. But this is the cable they provide to go to it. This already has your plus and your minus and already has a fuse built into it, so it's good to go. We're just going to leave this in place and get it connected later. All right, guys, we've got our hoses in the general area that they're going to end up. This one heads over to the pump. This one is the long one that's going all the way up front to the radiator. Now it's time to go ahead and put our turbo on our intake manifold and then get that mounted to the engine itself. Let's go ahead and get our gasket in place. Make sure it's clean. Kind of tight in here. All right, next, let's just get everything snugged down, and then we're going to use one of our Motion Pro tools to hold this wrench to get in there to those ones we can't get a torque wrench directly on. Well, honestly, there's only one that we can use just a regular extension. The other 3 will have to use this adapter to get that torqued. And that is important because each one of these need to go to 18 foot-pounds. Now we're going to make a couple of passes when we do that just to make sure, because we are compressing a metal gasket. All right, everyone's seated. Let's go around and get them torqued. We'll do the easy one first. Now the trick to using one of these is that you need to make sure that you're at 90 degrees to it. So right there, that's where it needs to be. And that distance won't matter. All right, that's all 4, but let's go back and check each one to make sure they're all at the right torque. See, there it took a little bit more as we were compressing that metal gasket. All right, guys, I think we're ready to go. Let's get it put on the machine. I want to go ahead and prep these studs. I prefer to use a high temp anti-seize spray, just a little bit. Not that I'm being pessimistic, but in case we ever want to take this apart, this may make it possible. All right, next, let's get in our exhaust gaskets. Now let's bring her up into position. All right, let's go ahead and get these started. As we're working these down, you can count on having to go back and forth a few times before everything gets compressed into place and torqued down, because we want to end up with a final torque of 14 foot-pounds. And I have heard or read that after about 100 miles, we need to come back and re-torque these probably a couple of times. Right now, let's get them all just seated, and then we'll break out the torque wrench. It amazes me how much weight is just hanging off that engine now. Like I said, we'll have to make a couple of passes because we're compressing down those gaskets. So we've got everything torqued down. Let's head over to the other side of the engine where we're going to remove one of the oil passageway plugs, and we're going to put in a flange bolt for our oil line. And don't forget your crush washer. And we've got it in there snug. Let's torque it to 8.7 foot-pounds. Now don't just guess at this because this is a hollow bolt. And if you're wrong, you're going to snap it. All right, guys, let's get in our first oil line to that fitting that we just installed. So the 90-degree bend goes to the turbo. The 45 heads over here because when you install the throttle bodies, it would hit the 90-degree one. Now let's get our throttle bodies on. Make sure everything clears. And this is not easy, by the way. Yeah, good luck on doing that without a little bit of contact cleaner to get it to slide on. Whew. The question is, am I hitting there or do I have a teeny bit of clearance? Good to go. Now let's get our throttle body boots tightened down, which will be more important now than ever because we're going to be under pressure. Question is, how many PSI are we going to go for? 6, 8, 12? Get it reprogrammed for 16 or 18 and have to run race fuel? Nah, we probably won't take it that far. If you went with the bigger injectors and put in the race fuel, you could get 350 horsepower, if not more, out of it. But your reliability would just have to go through the floor with that, and that's not what I want. And I'm not racing it anyway. This is just to give it a little bit more pep in its step. Next, let's get in our oil drain flange with its gasket, and it goes to the bottom of the turbo. And we're going to torque these bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Now let's get our oil drain line attached, and we just want to point it back in this direction for right now. I guess we'll go ahead and tighten that up. If we need to loosen it, we'll loosen it. All right, next let's get our 40-inch coolant line, and it heads right here. And then our 38 line goes over on the other side. All right, guys, as you can see, I am struggling in vain trying to get this one fitting to tighten up. So what we're going to do is release this arm, bring the box end of the wrench all the way up on the hose itself, bing, get it tightened up. Then we're going to put that arm back on very carefully and then get the circlip back in position. All right, next let's get our turbo outlet pipe along with its associated gasket on there. I'm not going to torque these yet. I'm going to address putting on the exhaust later. But for right now, we're going to skip over that and head on to the next step, which is, believe it or not, to remove this timing cover or bolt, if you will, because that is where the old drain line is going to attach to the engine. Pretty creative, if you ask me. So you've got the adapter, then you have this 5mm spacer, which also will seal it up, as it is made out of aluminum or aluminium. Make Jeremy happy. There. Well, I'm glad I've got the exhaust off. It'd be all in my way right now. Careful right here. Don't let it cross thread on you. There's not a lot of clearance. All right, next we're going to reroute this idle air control line under the throttle bodies and then up in between the intakes for cylinder 2 and 3. Now when we get it up there, we want to actually cut off right before it goes into the turn. All right, guys, a little bit more cutting. We're going to come in and cut this, and then we're going to leave 2 straight sections, and this is what's going to attach to our 2 coolant lines that are still hanging over there. All right, so we're going to bring our 40-inch in here. And then the 38 to the top one. And it should do. All right, next we just need to remove our intake air temperature off of our old air box and just transfer it over after we clean it up just a little bit. All right. Next, we just need to install the nipple on our intake manifold. Now we just want to hang these on there loosely, oriented like this, so we can get to them to tighten them down. All right, let's get her popped on there. All right, let's tighten down those clamps. Next, we need to get this little support bracket in place. Now, they'd already sent this particular nut and bolt, which is a locking type, and the one I'm going to use up top, which they did not provide, is going to have a lock washer as well. Now, if yours doesn't, you need to put some Loctite up there. Actually, this bolt will go through the old tank, but I don't have that mounted right now. We're going to temporarily put it in place, that way I can get the rest of the plumbing done without disturbing the boots. Very good. Right, next, they want you to put the boost pressure hose to that nipple that we installed earlier. Now we're just going to attach it with a zip tie to keep pressure on it. All right, next, let's go ahead and get our first 90-degree silicone elbow on. We're going to go ahead and put on a second clamp, but that'll be tightened down later when we get our air cooler in place. All right, next, we want to remove this map sensor on the back and replace it with a 3-bar unit. On this kit, I believe that's number 20. All right, guys, we're getting ready to install the air cooler, but before we do that, I did a test fit, and this first hose that goes into it, it needs to be cut down, otherwise it pushes out too far. And it turns out that this hose is just a little too long, because if we mount it uncut, it pushes everything too far. So I've got it marked. Let me get this cut, take out about 1 inch, and then we'll start assembling it. All right, now let's see what we've got. Okay, much more like it, because your attachment points are right here. And now it lines up like it's supposed to. It just took a little bit of trimming to get it to go in there right. I think it's safe for us to go ahead and tighten these down now. Personally, it bothers me to have this much thread hanging out, but these are the bolts that they sent. Now let's get in there and tighten up a couple of clamps. In the kit, you know, she had 3 90-degree elbows. 2 of them were the same, and then you had one that goes from a 2.5 down to a 2. Of course, that goes over to the turbo side. Need a little bit more distance here. Okay, once you push these on, don't push too far, because getting them to come back is not easy. Now we got it. All right. All right, guys, give me a couple of minutes just to get my oil tank remounted, because I want to be at the same point as you are in your install, because of course we're in the middle of doing a frame swap, and I never had installed the oil tank. But now I need to go ahead and put it in place, and then we'll modify the hoses accordingly and get that new catch can and separator installed. All right guys, we're ready to go now. Let's go ahead and remove these two hoses along with the oil separator. Break that seal loose and then she'll come off. All right, with the oil separator out of the way, we're going to use its mounting place for the cooling surge tank. Before you tighten this down, make sure you've got a little bit of clearance in between it and the intake box. All right, so we've taken away the old separator mounting place. The new separator will be mounted against this wall once that's installed. And now, let's get these protective caps cut off. Now this is going to be hose number 41, which I believe is 11 inches long, and it's a 3/4. All right, remember our hoses from so long ago that we ran from the front of the vehicle? Well, now we finally get to connect them. So 44, which was the really long one, will head to the bottom of the heat exchanger, and the other one that comes off the pump goes to the cooling surge tank. Yeah, I'm zip tying this in place, but honestly, I won't know if these are permanent until I get everything put back on. But this is generally the way you're going to want it routed. Of course, you want to keep as far away from the turbo as you can because a lot of heat gets generated from it. So keep that particular hose as far away as it'll let you. All right guys, you need to pay attention at this point. That brand new radiator cap that they sent, it does not go on this particular tank. It actually goes on your radiator. Now the one that's on your radiator right now, you pull it off and put it on this tank. Now this will get installed on the radiator once I reinstall it. So now we get to deal with the idle air control hose setup. All right, remember when we cut that one section up here? Well, now we take this 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter and attach it to the end of this hose. Then you take hose number 60, which is 8 inches long, 1/2 inch. Attach it to the other end of the barb. Now we take the 4-inch, 1/2 inch hose and go into this T. The 5-inch to this side of the T, and then bring that back in to the 8-inch. It's where you end up like this. And we're going to add zip ties in a little bit, but let's get everything in position before we lock it in. All right, give me a minute while I reinstall my air cutoff valve. All right, let's get this hose off our air injection valve, because that one is going to head over. That I'm reusing one of the clamps. All right guys, the next part is to install this 135-degree arm that's going to in turn go up to the airbox through another fitting. But guess what? Looks the part is not long enough. Now I went through all kind of gyrations trying to figure that out. I even started reassembling the rest of the machine and working backwards to this to make sure I was right. And there ended up being a gap about like that. The only thing I can come up with is whatever supplier the GYTR team was using, well, they made a mistake. So what did I have to do? Ordered another one, a little bit longer, and actually cut it to fit. And you can see that's what we actually needed. So hopefully yours does not have this too short version in your kit. So with the correct length, well, let's grab a clamp and get it installed so we can finish this thing up. All right, we're going to leave the clamp a little bit loose for a few more minutes in case we have to shift anything around. But that should be it. All right, next we're going to get in our air hose, and you want to position this to where this larger barb is going toward the right side of the vehicle, and then the smaller one is facing down. Now I also want to take note, when you're putting on these clamps, you want to make sure that the clamps end up being perpendicular and not cocked one way or the other. Otherwise, it's not going to tighten down correctly and probably loosen up over time. Now, per the instructions, hose number 62 is supposed to go from here to this T. Well, I don't know about you, but that looks like a 90 degree to me. So we had this left over from, I think it was the air purge valve on top of the engine. So what I'm going to do is cut it down and have it go in like this. Then we're going to take 63, attach it, and there will be an oil catch tank over on that side sometime soon. But once we get these at least pushed onto the barbs, we're going to go back and then put zip ties on each one of those connections to hold them in place. All right, guys, I got to give credit where credit is due. Normally, when I see a little rack or a container of zip ties like this, I go, man, that's going to be some of those El Cheapos that aren't going to last any length of time. And I make sure I'm ready with some higher end stuff to go in place of it. But upon closer inspection, believe it or not, these are on par or better than the ones that I was going to use. These are actually from Thomas & Betts. So rest assured, they're not going to let go. So you're good to go with the stock ones. Don't use the cheap stuff though. Well done, GYTR. All right, guys, before we go any further, I want to pause and swap out the injectors because this is going to have a stage 3 tune, and I decided to go with 1,000cc Bosch injectors. So let me get that done real quick, and then we'll continue. You can tell this one's been sitting for a while. I think we better clean up that fuel rail. Okay, let's go. All right, for this particular setup, you do not want to use the seals that came with these particular Bosch units. They're too big, so you'll need to reorder 3 of the OEM ones to go on the Bosch injectors. All right, let's get her back on the machine. Guess you can kind of guess why I didn't want to do this after everything else was installed now, right? All right, with these particular Bosch injectors, you do have to use an adapter. So if you order these on your own, make sure you get an adapter to handle that conversion. Things get awfully tight in here with all this stuff. Now let's go ahead and get our coils in, because really once I get that adapter plate and the airbox in, all this would be really difficult to get to. Now we need to install the 1/4-inch boost pressure hose to the barb on the wastegate actuator and secure that with zip ties. All right, next let's go ahead and get that last 3-inch silicone tube on this aluminum T-fitting, if you want to call it that. We'll go ahead and get our clamps in place and put in our airbox later. All right, this last one, we'll leave it pointed down to where I can get to it with an extension. All right, guys, let's get our hoses put together for this side of the radiator, which has not been mounted yet. But what you need to put together is 66, 69, 67, and then 68. And you want it to look about like this with this, I guess you call it a bleeding screw, pointed forward on the machine. So this is the way you want to set up. Then onto the water pump. I think we want to end up about right here. Now, one long zip tie about right here. So this takes care of the plumbing modifications for the turbo install. Now I just need to go back to the other side and reinstall the factory equipment for 2019. Next, let's deal with the air cleaner. Now in the instructions, they want you to mount this plate to the frame itself, and then this holder, and then the air cleaner itself. I've elected not to do it that way because there's not a lot of working room in there. So what we're going to do is go ahead and mount the holder and the air cleaner to the bracket, and then mount the bracket to the frame. So get yours to look like this. Leave these loose so you can still rotate the housing, and we'll go ahead and get it installed. So we will be attaching it with this bolt that was also going through the air cooler, and then this other bracket down here is where you're going to feed through that 6mm nut and bolt. So let's see if we can get all of this stuff to cooperate at the same time. That is going to be it, believe it or not. So go ahead and get the silicone hose onto the intake, or the air box rather. Put a little bit of brake cleaner on it, make it slide in there a bit easier. There we go. Now we've got something. Now we can feed this through the bracket, through the air cooler, and then through the frame. Now the front part of the bracket, we're using this 10mm head bolt and then this locking nut. I think we are going to reroute one thing. The hose that's going to end up going to the catch can, we're going to bring it on top of that bracket. I think I'm liking that better. I'm not liking how this is going to rub against that edge. I think we've got enough distance to move this on the other side. So let's reroute that around. It eventually would cut through it, in my opinion. Even if I am not doing it the way Yamaha wanted it, maybe I don't want it that way. Aren't you glad I'm going through this learning curve instead of you? Now you're glad you're watching this video, aren't you? We're going to roll with that till something else proves me wrong. But I like that a lot better than what we were looking at. Now we can tighten up this back bolt. Last, let's go back and tighten up our clamp on that silicone hose. Now we had these loose, but at this point we can go ahead and tighten them down. All right, let's go ahead and get our air filter crammed in there. Well, this engine used to have a lot of room to work on it. Not anymore. All right, let's go ahead and get our air oil separator in. You're basically reusing one of your hoses from the old one and then connecting in this new one. Now, what you're going to want to do is mount this to the bulkhead. Of course, mine isn't installed yet, but it's simple. Just a couple of bolts straight through, nuts on this side, right in that general location right there. Then you also want to, of course, reattach the drain line, which was connected to your old separator. It's going to be the same size down at the bottom. All right, guys, we basically finished the installation of the turbo. Now we need to go back and put in our fluids. So we've got to put radiator fluid for the cooling surge tank. Then once we reinstall the radiator, we have to refill the engine cooling system. Then we need to prime the turbo with oil and then get the oil system refilled as well. Now, if you need help doing this, you may need to reference your service manual. All right, let's start with the cooling surge tank. We want to go ahead and fill it with coolant. Now, for me, I can't turn on the ignition, so I'm just going to use a battery to cycle the pump as I'm going through this procedure. Now, what I'm going to do is verify the pump is running, and then I'm going to check to ensure the coolant is flowing. Now, what we need to do is locate the bleeder valve on top of the radiator in the front. And we want to open this up until we start seeing coolant flow out of the bleeder itself. Close the valve, check the surge tank, and fill it again. I mean, all we're doing right now is just getting air out of the system. But if coolant does not flow, we need to unbolt the pump from the bracket, position the pump at the lowest point of the cooling circuit, and lightly shake the pump to free any trapped air. Now, chances are you're not going to have to do this, but I just want to prepare you that you could have a really stubborn air pocket that we have to release at the pump itself. So whatever you do at this point, do not open that valve up on the radiator, because you'll just have to do all of this again. And after that, you just reinstall the pump, refill the surge tank up to the radiator cap, and you're going to need at least 5 quarts of Yamacool to pull this off. So make sure you've got that on hand. Well, all right, guys, that's going to wrap up this part of the procedure, although you can tell I've got a whole lot of work to do. Well, hello everyone. For those just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla Black Friday live stream. We are streaming live until 1 p.m. Eastern time today and giving away new prizes every 30 minutes. Now our next prize up is the iconic 7-panel red Partzilla hat. Really high quality. Everybody loves that flat bill, that wide panel in the front, completely adjustable. But if that's not really your style and you want something more traditional, well, we'll be glad to send you out just a regular flex type standard bill hat. So it's entirely up to you. We want you to be happy. So new hotness, old guy hat, whichever one you want, just let us know and we'll get it sent out to you. Now keep in mind, we're only giving away 10 of these in the next 30 minutes only. But all you need to do is go now to partzilla.com/Black Friday and enter to win. It doesn't cost you anything, but you need to do it now. So go enter. All right, guys, also want to remind you that we're having a huge sale on our Partzilla t-shirts and tank tops. Now we're selling those for only $9 each, and that is 65% off MSRP. Now also, for today only, if you use the code LIVE24, that's going to get you free shipping no matter what you order, as long as it's over $25. So that's a huge saving for you. But remember, it's today only. All right, guys, I'm only here live for another hour. So while you are entering to win, I'm going to be playing some of my favorite how-to videos in between the giveaways. Now comment on the feed during one of the how-to videos for chances to win bonus prizes, such as stickers, hats, and gift cards. Now we're going to be picking commenters at random, so if you want to comment to win, make sure you follow us on our social channels so we can DM you to get the information we need to get the prizes sent out to you. Sound like a plan? Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time answering the age-old question, why does an engine blow up? Well, 90% of the time it's because you didn't maintain it properly. That is the #1 killer. Now when we talk about maintenance, we're referring to 3 main categories for your engine. It's going to be your intake system, which is your air filter, your lubrication system, which is going to be your oil and oil filter, and then you've got your coolant system, which handles the temperature of the engine for the most part. Now if you don't take care of all 3 of those together, chances are you're going to end up having a catastrophic failure. Eventually, it's going to happen. What usually happens? Well, you leave your oil in there just a little too long. It starts to break down. The bearings aren't getting lubricated. The valves aren't moving like they're supposed to. Getting abnormal cam wear. I mean, all the bad signs of not having the right amount of lubrication. Well, inevitably, those wear items start to bind up, and that cuts down on your clearances, and then eventually you're going to lock down the engine. Either your bearings are going to spin, or that valve's going to hang up and get hit by the piston, and then all kind of chaos ensues. So what is the best way to combat that? Well, it's really simple. Follow your maintenance schedule. Don't cut any corners. Follow it all the way through. Change your oil like you're supposed to, and then make very sure that you keep your oil filter cleaned and or replaced if necessary. The other key maintenance part that you have to stay on top of is to make sure your air filter is good to go. That is your lungs for your machine. If it gets stopped up, it's not going to breathe properly. Worse yet, if it's a foam filter and it starts to break down, well, guess what? Then it's going to let all those particulates in that it was designed to keep out. What are they going to do when they get inside of your engine? That's what they call dusting a motor. Well, you've got all these abrasive materials flying around inside of your combustion chamber, which do not ignite, but what they do is actually score into your pistons, your rings, and your cylinder walls. And when that happens, you lose compression, and guess what? Your engine's going to stop functioning like it's supposed to. Let's spend a moment talking about coolant. That is largely ignored. You have your machine several years and you don't even think about changing it. That is a serious mistake because, believe it or not, coolant does break down over time, and then it can become more acidic and actually eat through the passageways it's designed to protect. And when it does that, it enters into parts of the engine that it was never designed to be. It starts mixing with your oil, possibly your fuel in your combustion chamber, and guess what? Your engine's going to let go. Now let's take the maintenance out of the equation for a moment, because that's not always the case. I said that was 90%. What about the other 10%? What can cause an engine to cut loose? That other 10%, it is usually aimed more toward your performance aspect of an engine. And what usually goes wrong there? Well, you're trying to draw a little bit too much out of that motor, pushing your air fuel a little bit too much toward the lean side, or maybe turning over a little too many RPMs, and then a collision happens and then chaos ensues. It's a term they use in the sports car industry called a money shift. A money shift happens when you're in fifth gear or top gear, and let's say you're going to bring it down into fourth as you're coming into a turn. Well, you bring it into fourth, let out your clutch, and all kind of chaos ensues because you didn't shift into fourth, you shifted into second, and that sent your rev counter all the way over and then broke the rear end loose. You want to see what that looks like? Take a look at this little short clip. And yes, if you're curious, that was me and my car. What happens during a money shift? Well, you've got a piston going through its regular travel up and down inside of your cylinder. You've got the valves, typically that are above it, that are moving inside their valve guides with a cam on top typically, and the spring, which is actually bringing it back. And when you money shift, you've exceeded the RPMs at which that spring can retract that valve. So what happens? The valve has not pulled all the way back, piston comes up, catches the edge of the valve, bends it, and then if you're lucky, it stops at that point. And if you're unlucky, it bends it to the point, the next time your piston comes up, it actually destroys the piston and drives it up through the head. Now on the performance side, there's so much that can go wrong because you're trying to extract maximum power, maximum RPMs, maximum torque out of an engine, probably beyond what it was initially designed to handle. What can go wrong? Well, you may be a little off on your programming as far as your air fuel map goes. It gets a little too lean, then you burn a hole in the top of your piston. Worse than that, it overheats, blows a head gasket. Even worse than that, overheats, piston actually seizes up inside of the cylinder, breaks your connecting rod, and then drives the connecting rod out the side of the engine, breaking your engine cases. It happens, trust me. I've seen it and it's never pretty. So if you're going to be modifying your engine, take some advice. Go with a package that's designed to work unless you want to go through the pain of the learning curve as to where each of those items can happen and you end up lunching an engine. Fair warning. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Making sure bolts and nuts are tightened to the correct torque is crucial when you're working on your machine. And while in many cases we're thinking about getting the bolts tight enough, there are many cases where the bigger risk is over-tightening. And if you've watched any of our videos, there are a lot of times, particularly when we're closing up engine cases, where we have to go through a torque sequence to get everything assembled properly. So, which type of torque wrench should you use? There are digital and click type wrenches. So if you want to learn which one you should get in your toolbox, let's go. Okay guys, let's just get this out right up front. When it comes to accuracy, neither a click type or a digital type torque wrench is better than the other. If you set them properly and keep them calibrated, they're going to get the right torque. But there are other things to consider that may make you lean one way or the other. Now, first and foremost, there's the price. Let's face it, it is a consideration with almost everything, and as you can guess, there is a huge difference in between a click and a digital type torque wrench. Now, the click type torque wrenches are going to come in at a good bit cheaper than a digital version. They're much simpler, and if you know how to set them, they'll get the job done every single time. And why? Well, that's because they're simple and they're reliable. There are just fewer parts that can break or malfunction. And don't forget, you never have to worry about a dead battery with a click type torque wrench. But none of this means that a click type torque wrench doesn't come with its drawbacks. First, if you're new to torque wrenches, setting the correct torque requires a bit of a learning curve. And if it's dark, believe me, if you're under a car or under your machine, it can get really difficult to see that tiny little scale that's printed on the side. Now, you also need to be really careful to zero out the torque wrench after you use the wrench so that you don't stress the spring inside, which will throw off the calibration. So what about the digital torque wrench? Now, this is what I have in my toolbox, and it has served me well. Now, you need to know that relative to the click type torque wrench, there's a little bit of a sticker shock when it comes to the price. But for that price, you get a really simple setup. Now, first, you have a digital display showing your torque and setting. Now, adjusting the torque is as simple as pushing the buttons up or down, and the digital wrenches usually have a little LED in the display, a beeper, and a vibrating handle to let you know when you've hit the correct torque when you're tightening a bolt. The other advantage is versatility. Now, the digital unit will usually be able to measure torque in as many as 5 different units: Newton meters, foot pounds, inch pounds, kilogram feet, and kilogram centimeters. Now, one of the major advantages of my particular wrench, it actually can do angle calibration. So instead of having to have a manual setup like this or a digital add-on to your standard torque wrench, it has it built in there. And the other really cool thing about it, it will compensate for you having to go back and pull a little bit more to get that angle. Because let's face it, sometimes you don't have a 360-degree span that allows you to do that. Sometimes you may be trying to get an angle where you can only pull 10 to 15 degrees at a time. So that's something you really ought to consider if you're going to spend the money for a digital wrench. Now, the downside, you will have to keep up with keeping the batteries replaced or charged. But for that and the price, you get way more versatile unit that will work with just about every single application. So, which one is right for you? It basically boils down to the cost and how much versatility you need. You can save some cash by buying a click type wrench, but you'll have a slightly more complex setting scale, and you box yourself into whatever unit's used on the side of the wrench. Now, on the other hand, if you can afford it, you get way more versatility and ease of use with the digital unit. Now, if you need a new torque wrench or any other tools for your toolbox, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. All right, guys and girls, you've heard of a 2-minute warning. Well, this is a 5-minute warning. This is the last 5 minutes for our current giveaway. Enter to win now at partzilla.com/Black Friday. So get over there and enter to win. There's only a few minutes left.
To do what I do, it takes guts. It takes you not being afraid of what people think, not being afraid of what could happen, just pursuing what your dream is within a dying pursuit. Like, that's what it takes. My name's Ian Gaines, and I ride sport bikes improperly for a living, so I'm a stunt rider. In my family, we say lead from the front. It means put yourself in the position that you were born to be in every time. Having my family involved is way better than all the years up until now. But never did it feel more complete till now. There's probably nothing that brings us closer than riding motorcycles. We have a rhythm. Our rhythm is brum, 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 brum. Like, that's us, you know? So it's just cool. I do probably 90% or more of the work on my bikes. Getting parts from Partzilla in our game is huge. Being able to get those things for your bike at my level is great because there's no worry, there's no anxiety, there's no stress, there's no fitment issues. You know that works for this. My mantra is passing on the passion. I want other people to learn and love to ride the same way that I do. It's taking all the experiences you've had as a motorcycle rider, bundling them up, and spreading them and teaching other people about why you like it. It's the wind, it's the revs, it's the motor, it's the machine, it's the sound, going through the gears. There's no rules, there's no track, there's no finish line, there's no starting line, there's no staging, there's none of that. It's just the ultimate level of free expression.
Hello, everyone, and if you're just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla Black Friday live stream. We are streaming live until 1 p.m. Eastern time today and giving away new prizes every 30 minutes. Now, for this section, we're giving away 5 CRF shirts as well as 5 Partzilla tank tops. Now, what am I talking about? I think this is the OG here. You broke it, you fix it. And that was back when we did our CRF 450 build. So this is one of the first shirts we ever came out with. And I think it's a limited run, and we're just about out of them. So now it's your chance to go in and enter and win 5. We're also going to be giving away 5 tank tops as well, or what they call muscle shirts. Now keep in mind, the shirts that I just showed you, those are our limited editions, because once they're gone, they're gone. However, if you just want to head over and buy one of the standard t-shirts or tank tops, we have those on sale for $9 each, and that is 65% off MSRP. And overall, we're actually using code LIVE24 for today only, where you get free shipping on any orders over $25. I mean, how are you going to beat that? All right, guys, I only have a couple more videos to show you, but make sure you stay tuned in because I have a huge prize coming up next. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today I want to talk to you just a little bit about the different type clutches you'll find on today's motorcycles versus the type you'll find on some older machines. Now, most newer models have what's called a wet clutch, meaning it's in the crankcase and bathed in the engine oil, and a lot of older bikes have dry clutches housed outside the crankcase. So, if you want to find out how they're different, let's get started. All right, guys, a little backstory here. years ago, dry clutches were really common on most motorcycles, but there's a catch. They contribute to you having a really loud motorcycle as you spin up the RPMs, getting that clutch to catch. So that, and the fact that a wet clutch is so much more forgiving, led manufacturers to making a change that really impacted the whole industry, with just a few exceptions with companies like BMWs, Ducatis, and Moto Guzzi. So why would you want a dry clutch? Well, it's housed on the outside of the crankcase, so there's no engine oil involved at all. And that means you don't give up any power due to the slippage from the oil. Now, every bit of power transferred through the clutch to the rear wheel makes it there, so you're going to get the absolute most out of your engine. And since the clutch isn't in the engine, that means less contamination from clutch plates in the oil. Now, there are a few catches to having a dry clutch. First, they can be prone to overheating, well, because there's no oil to keep them cool. And that can lead to clutch fade and increased wear. And that can mean more maintenance. They also have a pretty small window where they're able to engage. So when they bite, it can be, well, harsh to say the least. Now, on the other side, when you have a wet clutch, here you're going to have the clutch housed inside the crankcase. Now, we have a lot of videos where we've rebuilt the wet clutches on a motorcycle or ATV. And the first step is always to soak the clutch plates in oil before you install them so they will be sufficiently saturated. Now, all of that oil helps since you've got lots of friction inside that clutch system, and that oil keeps them cool. Their design also keeps them small and light, and that means less weight for your motor has to push, giving you a little bit better power to weight ratio. Another advantage just comes from rider experience. They've got a wide range of engagement and they give you lots of feel. And people who ride in a lot of stop and go traffic find them a lot easier to use. And also, it's just quieter. And that's just another reason they've ended up on the majority of the motorcycles that you're going to find out there today. Well, guys, there you have it. A dry clutch can give you some performance benefits with power transfer, but it's a trade-off because that wet clutch can be much more comfortable to ride with less weight on the motor and a little less maintenance. And speaking of maintenance, if you need any parts for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Now, if you work on any machine long enough, eventually you're going to run into a stripped bolt, a broken bolt, a stripped out screw, or in this case, a stripped out Phillips head. And on this particular one, it happens to be on a brake master cylinder. There are a couple of different techniques that I can show you that might be able to extract this one out so we can go ahead and bleed those brakes. Now, do you need to remove it from your machine? No. I just thought it'd be simpler to bring it over to the table. That way you've got complete access to see what I'm doing and see if I'm successful on extracting this screw or not. So let's go ahead and take this, get it tightened down in the vise, and then I can show you the ways that I'm going to attempt to get that thing out of there. And as you can see, this is our damaged screw head. And this happens so easily because the majority of your master cylinder screws, like this one, they're made out of aluminum. And you put in the wrong size screwdriver, you're not paying attention, or maybe it's corroded a little bit. You put some torque to it and spins it out. And that's exactly what happened here. A little bit too small of a Phillips screwdriver is what did this one in. So for attempt number one, we're going to use the correct size Phillips screwdriver and put a lot of down pressure on it and see if that lets it go. No. Now at this point, stop. Don't try it again, because if you don't, you're going to actually damage it where the correct size bit will not remove it. At this point, you need to go to stage 2. It's probably one of my favorite tools out there. And this simple device is an impact, a hand impact. With this attachment, you can go with different size Phillips bits that should have a better chance of knocking this loose. Pick one that's going to fit in there the best. See, that one barely rocks? That's what we're after. Now, had we taken that original one and put too much effort into it, it It would have damaged it, and even this would not have had a chance to extract it. Now these things, they ratchet a little bit, and you want to make sure it's ratcheted all the way to the extraction point. That way when you hit it, it's going to impact it and turn it at the same time. You don't have to put a lot of force turning it, you just put a little bit of pressure against it, just ever so slightly. Now we hit it. We're just looking for one little edge. It only has to bite it that one time to get it to release. There it is. Trust me, you would have never pulled that off with a regular Phillips screwdriver. No way for that to happen. That little guy, probably the favorite tool I've had in the toolbox since I was 13 years old. That is what success looks like. Now, what would I do if that didn't work? Well, your last option would be to drill it out, but there's a specific way you need to do that. You want to pick a small pilot drill inside of the diameter of the actual threads, because we don't want to damage the threads. And basically all we're wanting to do is just drill down a little bit, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Then you come back with a larger drill bit with the same angle as the seat, because all we're trying to do is remove the material in this outer area to where you can lift the cap off. So you drill with this one first and then finish off with this one, and then hopefully you can grab it from the side with a pair of pliers and then extract it. Now if it's really corroded in there, it's pretty much going to be game over. You'll have to drill it all the way through, and then it's going to take a fine touch to rethread this. At that point you're probably going to end up replacing it, but I'd still give it a shot. And all I have to do now is go to Partzilla.com and order a replacement screw. So what did we learn from all this? Having the right tool makes all the difference. Well, listen, if you need any tools or parts for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of.
A perfect session to me would be throwing that thing through the air. My name is Scott Champion. I race professional motocross, supercross, and UTV racing, and I'm working on living up to that last name. Growing up, I definitely knew that I wanted to race motocross and supercross professionally. My dad, he raced professionally, my uncle raced, and I would just ride with them pretty much from 4 years old. We would ride from the garage and spend all day on our bikes. I turned pro in 2008. I qualified 4th overall and kind of put myself on the map. The best thing about being pro is you get to ride your motorcycle every day, right? The hardest part about being pro, definitely the injuries. You know, it's not if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt. In 2021, I had a shoulder injury. My dad was like, hey, come check out this UTV race and I think you'll really like it. Literally went in with no expectations and won a couple races that year, and I just wanted more and more and more of it. Coming from 2 wheels, I definitely have some strengths on the track, picking good lines, putting myself in good positions, and then just knowing how to hit the jumps. Putting the #1 plate on my UTV has been awesome. It's a big number to run. Some guys are like, oh, I'm not running it next year, but you know, you gotta let them know sometimes. I'm learning all the parts of the car. There's so many things going on and so many new things to me. I'm looking forward to perfecting those. I can relate a lot of things in racing to, you know, life lessons. You know, if you have a bad race or if you end up breaking the bike, you figure out a way to fix it, and same with anything in life. The no quit, the no give up attitude is something that I learned in racing and something that I use almost every day. I am not scared of taking risks if it means winning.
Well, hello everybody. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Partzilla.com Black Friday event. Now, if you're on the West Coast, good morning. If you've been streaming with us the whole time, well, thanks for enjoying this crazy Friday with us. We've been giving away prizes every 30 minutes all morning, and this is our final prize of the day, so we are swinging for the fence. Now, starting now, you can enter to win $100 each to buy anything you want from Partzilla. And plus, we're going to put in a hoodie in whichever hat you would like to get from us. So you're really getting 3 prizes this time around. All you need to do is go to Partzilla.com/Black Friday right now to be entered to win. And you may want to tag a friend who could use that $100 to get them entered to win. Now, one last reminder that we're having a huge sale on our Partzilla t-shirts and tank tops. Now, we're selling those for only $9 each, and that's 65% off of their standard MSRP. All you have to do is head over to Partzilla.com and place your order. And if you order $25 or more, use the code LIVE24 and you're going to get free shipping. All right, guys, we just want to say thank you for tuning in to our Black Friday live stream. Be sure to tune in every Friday at 3 for our live Q&A with me. Well, except for today, because I'm going to enjoy my time off and my coming turkey coma. So everybody have a safe rest of your week, and thank you.